itself, just talking about the history of scouting. Took me a little while to put this together. I couldn't decide what I wanted to cover. I went back and forth about talking about Baden-Powell or not to talk about Baden-Powell, because everybody talks about Baden-Powell. But what is the history of scouting without Baden-Powell? So I'm going to read a little excerpt here about Baden-Powell, who he was and what he was to scouting. Scouting began in England in 1907, 1908, created by General Robert Baden-Powell, a 50-year-old bachelor at the time, was one of the few heroes to come out of Britain's South African Boer War. He was known primarily for his unusual ideas about military scouting. Baden-Powell made a statement that over 50% of the British men that enlisted in the British Army weren't fit to fight. They could live in the city or whatever, but they knew nothing about taking care of themselves out in the wilderness. Of course, we know what kind of problem that can cause for the military, especially in the early 1900s. So, he explained in his book, Aids to Scouting, startled to discover that many boys were using his military book as a guide to outline activities. He began to think how he could convert his concepts of Army scouting for men to peace scouting for boys, gathering ideas from many sources. One of the things that came in around 1907, 1908 was Baden-Powell met with Ernest Seton, who is another name that a lot of us will recognize in scouting. He was from Canada. He was an artist, and he founded then what was called the Woodcraft Indians. Again, it was a whole lot like Boy Scouts of America, but Boy Scouts of America didn't exist at the time. And what you'll find in the early 1900s leading up to when the Boy Scouts was actually incorporated was there was what we would now call troops springing up all over the United States. Everybody had an idea of boys getting out into the open, camping, hiking, fishing, shooting, whatever it might be, but the key was the boys being outdoors. That was the key. So, anyway, Ernest Thomas Seton led Baden-Powell to, as we all know, there's a lot of Indian folklore within Boy Scouts, and that is directly related to Ernest Thomas Seton. When Baden-Powell started writing his book, and the first book he wrote for the English Boy Scouts was Scouting for Boys. This was written in 1908. It's a reproduction copy, but it's quite an interesting read when you start reading the book from that time. So anyway, Baden-Powell decides to test his theory about forming Boy Scouts. So he takes some scouts to an island, and it's called Roundsea Island. And this was in 1907. He found that the island camp was very successful. So after he did this, he rewrote his military book, and he called it Scouting for Boys. The climate was right for a young program like scouting, and it spread quickly around the British Commonwealth, then to other countries. So, '09 comes along. Baden-Powell's Boy Scouts were formed in 1907, 1908, and there is a well-known business philanthropist. He was a newspaper man, very rich at the time. Earned somewhere around $350,000 a year, which that was a lot of money in 1909. He published a newspaper. It only came out on Saturdays, and it was called the Saturday Blade. He liked to travel and do adventures. So, on his way to Africa for a safari. He stops in England. And all it says is he had to run an errand in England. I don't know what he was there for, but he was there to see somebody. So, according to legend, the man's name was William Boyce. But according to legend, Boyce was lost on a foggy street in London in 1909 when an unknown scout came to his aid, guiding him back to his destination. The boy then refuses Boyce's tip, explaining that he was merely doing his duty as a Boy Scout. Soon thereafter, Boyce met with Robert Baden Powell, who was the head of the Boy Scout Association at the time. Boyce returned to America, and 4 months later founded the Boy Scouts of America on February 8, 1910. He intended to base the program around American Indian lore. This version of the legend has been printed in numerous BSA handbooks and magazines. There are several variations of it, including ones that claim Boyce knew about scouting before the encounter, and that the unknown scout took him to scout headquarters. One thing it did say is he did go to scout headquarters, collected all kinds of pamphlets, and while he was away on safari, he read up on British Boy Scouts. And then he returned to America and started what we know today as Boy Scouts of America. Now, at that time, there was also another famous newspaper guy out west, and his last name was Hearst. And him and Boyce were in a rivalry. Hearst had founded a group called the United States Boy Scouts. Later, they merged with Boy Scouts of America, and it became one group, as well as the Woodcraft Indians that Seton had founded. They merged, became part of Boy Scouts of America. There was another individual that was very important to scouting at the same time frame, and his name was Dan Beard. He's a little closer to home. He was born and raised in Covington, Kentucky. And he did much the same thing. He had a group of boys, but he called them the Sons of Daniel Boone. Okay? Dan Beard was very much the outdoorsman. And the Sons of Dan Beard were probably more like what we consider our Boy Scouts of America today than possibly the other groups of the time. One thing I would like to cover that's kind of interesting, and let me find it here. I want to talk about ranks within the Boy Scouts, and this is something that a lot of people might not know. Some of this stuff I didn't know until I started researching this. But originally, when the Boy Scouts were first developed, there was only 3 ranks. There was tenderfoot, second class, and first class. And then, as you acquired merit badges, you would be awarded the, follow me here, the Life Scout Award. And then as you acquired more merit badges, you'd be awarded the Star Scout Award. Okay? Which is backwards from what it is today. Because our current rank from first class goes from Star to Life. They later changed that. There was only 5 merit badges required to go to Life Scout, and then you were required to earn another 10 to go to Star Scout. The first Eagle Scout was in 1912. His name was Arthur Eldridge. And you didn't, in 1912, in order to be an Eagle Scout, you didn't have to earn Life or Star. You only had to earn first class and 21 merit badges. In 1912, there were only 57 merit badges in existence. Okay? So, today, there's 134. And of those 134, there's only 10 that are still in existence, that were in existence in 1912, that still carry the same name. The program's different, but they still have the same artwork and the same names on the merit badge. So, what happened after Boyce incorporated the Boy Scouts is he went out and sought out a chief executive, which was a man by the name of Robinson. Robinson had been, throughout his time, dealt with boys a lot because he was very heavily involved with YMCA. And the first headquarters for the Boy Scouts was in New York at the YMCA. And for years, the YMCA hosted many troops all across the country. Shortly, one thing Robinson did was, and one thing Boyce wanted to make sure was, when he founded the Boy Scouts, he wanted to create a business, so that way it would be lasting. So Robinson went out and sought out the chief executive for the Boy Scouts, which was a man by the name of James West. And a lot of what we still have today, and as the organization goes, for the Boy Scouts of America is directly related to James West. If it wasn't for him, a lot of the programs that we have today wouldn't exist because they were his ideas. It's interesting when you read the history, the struggle between Dan Beard, Seton, West, because they didn't agree on a whole lot. Seton, basically, by 1915, he was out of the picture of scouting. He was no longer involved. Some of the ideas he had, James West said that's not the direction we're going, and he basically faded out of the picture. Boyce, he guaranteed James West that for the first year, Boy Scouts of America, he would donate $1,000 a month to the program. And that's what got him started. By 1912, Scouts were enrolled in every state. Scouts mobilized for the first of a series of national civic good turns, including the promotion of a safe and sane 4th of July. Other community good turns began. Sea Scouting for older Scouts was started. Boys Life was purchased to become an official BSA magazine. Membership during the year, Scouts and Scouters. 97,495 was the total members to date in 19